أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ستجدون آخرين يريدون أن يأمنوكم ويأمنوا قومهم كلما ردوا إلى الفتنة أركسوا فيها فإن لم يعتزلوكم ويلقوا إليكم السلم ويكفوا أيديهم فخذوهم واقتلوهم حيث ثقفتموهم وأولئكم جعلنا لكم عليهم سلطانا مبينا. Verse number 91. With the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. You will find that there are others who would like to be safe from you as well as safe from their own folk, but who, whenever they are faced anew with temptation to evil, plunge into it headlong. Hence, if they do not let you be, and do not offer you peace, and do not stay their hands, seize them and slay them whenever you come upon them. For it is against these that we have clearly empowered you to make war. You will find that there are other people who would like to be insecure from you as well as secure from their own people, but who, whenever they are faced once again with deception to evil, start doing with enthusiasm and energy in it headlong, it rashly, hurriedly. Hence, if they do not let you be, and do not offer you peace, and do not stay their hands, capture them and kill them whenever you come across them. For it is against these that we have clearly allowed you to war. Explanation 112. Whenever they are returned to temptation, deception, fitna in Arabic, they are thrown back into it, or thrown headlong, thrown rashly, hurriedly into it. Explanation 113. That we have given you clear authority, sultan, a solemn, serious reiteration, repetition of the ordinance, order, command, which permits war, allows war, only in self-defense. Chiefly the chapter Baqarah 190. What does it say? And fight in the cause of Allah those who fight you, but do not commit aggression. Allah does not love the aggressors. clearquran.com. As well as the corresponding notes. Verse number 92. وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ أَن يَقْتُلَ مُؤْمِنًا إِلَّا خَطَأً ومن قتل مؤمنا خطأ فتحرير رقبة مؤمنة ودية مسلمة إلى أهله إلا أن يصدقوا فإن كان من قوم عدو لكم وهو مؤمن فتحرير رقبة مؤمنة وإن كان من قوم بينكم وبينهم ميثاق فدية مسلمة إلى أهله وتحرير رقبة مؤمنة فمن لم يجد فصيام شهرين متتابعين توبة من الله وكان الله عليما حكيما. Verse number 92. And it is not conceivable that a believer should slay another believer unless it be by mistake. And upon him who has slain a believer by mistake, there is the duty of freeing a believing soul from bondage and paying an indemnity to the victim's relations, unless they forego it by way of charity. Now, if the slain, while himself a believer, belong to a people who are at war with you, the penance shall be confined to the freeing of a believing soul from bondage. Whereas if he belong to a people to whom you are bound by a covenant, it shall consist of an indemnity to be paid to his relations, in addition to the freeing of a believing soul from bondage. And he who does not have the wherewithal shall fast instead for 2 consecutive months. This is the atonement ordained by God, and God is indeed all-knowing, wise. And it is not imaginable that a Muslim person should kill another Muslim unless it be by mistake, by fault. And upon him who has slain, who has killed a believer by mistake, there is the duty, task of freeing a believing person from slavery and paying a compensation to the victim's relatives, unless they give up it by way of charity. Now, if the person who was killed, while himself a believer, Muslim, belong to a people who are at war with you, the redemption shall be confined, shall be limited to the freeing of a believing soul, mu'min in Arabic, from captivity, from slavery. Whereas if he belong to a people, belong to a group of people to whom you are bound by a covenant agreement, it shall consist of a compensation to be paid to his relations in addition to the freeing of a believer from slavery. And he who does not have the wherewithal shall fast instead for 2 successive months, 60 days. This is the atonement, this is the ransom ordered by Allah. And Allah is indeed knows everything and wise. Explanation 114. On the strength of this verse, read in conjunction with verse 93. Some of the Mu'tazilite scholars are of the opinion that they think that a believer who deliberately, intentionally kills another believer must be considered an unbeliever. Razi says, this does not, of course, apply to the execution, to the enforcement of a death sentence passed in due process of law. Explanation 115. Literally, his people, i.e., the heirs, the inheritors, or dependents, needies of the victim. The freeing of a believing soul, a believing person, from bondage, from captivity, mentioned 3 times in this verse, refers in the first instance to persons who have been taken captive in war. See also note on the chapter Anfal 67, and also note on chapter 58 and verse number 3. Explanation 116. Literally, who are hostile to you, who are enemy to you, implying that they are in an actual state of war. There is a war, that's why it says who are hostile to you. Explanation 117. This relates to cases where the victim is a non-Muslim belonging to a people with whom the Muslims have normal, peaceful relations. In such cases, the penalty, punishment, is the same as that imposed for the killing under similar circumstances of a fellow believer. Explanation 118, i.e., in the way prescribed, in the way ordered for fasting during the month of Ramadan. See also the chapter Baqarah, verse numbers from 183 to 187. This alleviation, this reduction, applies to a person who can't afford to pay the indemnity, the compensation, because he has got little money, and or purchase by the freedom of a slave, Razi says so, or cannot find a slave to be freed, as may be the case in our times. We can't find easily as a captive person in our contemporary times. Muhammad Asad says, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وغضب الله عليه ولعنه وعد له عذابا عظيما. Verse number 93. But whoever deliberately slays another believer, his requital shall be hell, therein to abide, and God will condemn him, and will reject him, and will prepare for him awesome suffering. But whoever intentionally kills another Muslim, his price shall be hell, therein to abide, and God will denounce him, and will reject him, and will prepare for him terrible suffering. Verse number 94. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا ضربتم في سبيل الله فتبينوا ولا تقولوا لمن ألقى إليكم السلام لست مؤمنا تبتغون عرض الحياة الدنيا فعند الله مغانم كثيرة كذلك كنتم من قبل فمن الله عليكم فتبينوا إن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. Hence, O you who have attained to faith, when you go forth to war in God's cause, use your discernment, and do not out of a desire for the fleeting gains of this worldly life. Say unto anyone who offers you the greeting of peace, thou art not a believer, for with God there are gains abundant. You too were once in the same condition, but God has been gracious unto you. Use therefore your discernment. Verily God is always aware of what you do. Therefore, O you believers, when you go forth to war in God's cause for the sake of Allah, use your perception, and do not out of a desire for the transient gains of this worldly life. Say unto anyone who offers you the greeting of peace, salam in Arabic, you are not a believer. Don't say so. For with God there are gains plentiful. You too were once in the same condition. You were not believing people in the past, but God has been gracious, merciful unto you. Use therefore your perception. Indeed, Allah is always aware of what you do. Explanation 119. SC means that's to say, and therefore one of the enemies. This verse prohibits the treating of non-combatants, ones who don't fight, as enemies, and using their supposed unbelief as an excuse. A pretext means excuse for plundering, for spoiling them. The injunction order, use your discernment, use your perception, tabayyanu in Arabic, imposes on the believers, Muslims, the duty of making sure, the task of making sure in every case, in every position, whether the persons concerned are actively engaged in hostilities, enmities or not. Explanation 120. Literally, thus have you too been aforetime, previously. Since the preceding former injunction, former teaching, refers to the whole community, it would seem that the above clause too bears the same implication, same meaning, namely a reference to the time when the Muslim community was, because of its weakness and numerical insignificance, at the mercy of enemies, endowed with, granted with greater power. Thus, the believers are told, as it were, remember your erstwhile, remember your former weakness, and treat the peacefully minded among your enemies, with the same consideration with which you yourselves were once hoping to be treated. Verse number 95. لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم فضل الله المجاهدين بأموالهم وأنفسهم على القاعدين درجة وكلا وعد الله الحسنى وفضل الله المجاهدين على القاعدين أجرا عظيما. Verse number 95. Such of the believers as remain passive other than the disabled cannot be deemed equal to those who strive hard in God's cause with their possessions and their lives. God has exalted those who strive hard with their possessions and their lives far above those who remain passive. Although God has promised the ultimate good unto all believers, yet has God exalted those who strive hard above those who remain passive by promising them a mighty reward. Such of the believers as remain passive other than the disabled cannot be considered equal to those who struggle hard in God's cause for the sake of Allah with their possessions and their lives. God has aggrandized those who struggle hard with their possessions, belongings, and their lives for above those who remain passive. Although God has promised the ultimate, final good unto all believers, yet has God aggrandized those who struggle hard above those who remain passive by promising them a mighty reward. Explanation 121. Literally, who sit at home, i.e., who do not participate in the struggle in God's cause for the sake of Allah, be it physical or moral. Explanation 122. The term mujahid is derived from the verb jahada, which means he struggled or strove hard or exerted himself, employed himself. Namely, that's to say, in a good cause and against evil. Consequently, so, jihad denotes, shows, striving in the cause of God, struggling in the way of Allah, in the widest sense of this expression. That's to say, namely, it applies not merely only to physical warfare, qital, but to any righteous struggle in the moral sense as well. Thus, for instance, the Prophet described man's struggle against his own passions and weaknesses, jihad and nafs, as the greatest jihad. Bayhaqi on the authority of Jabir ibn Abdullah. Verse number 96. درجات منه ومغفرة ورحمة وكان الله غفورا رحيما. Many degrees thereof and forgiveness of sins and His grace, for God is indeed much forgiving, a dispenser of grace. Many degrees there and forgiveness of sins and Allah's mercy, for Allah is really forgives much and He gives grace. Verse number 97. إن الذين توفاهم الملائكة ظالمي أنفسهم قالوا فيما كنتم قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها فأولئك مأواهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا. Behold, those whom the angels gather in death while they are still sinning against themselves, the angels will ask, what was wrong with you? They will answer, we were too weak on earth. The angels will say, was then God's earth not wide enough for you to forsake the domain of evil? For such, then, the goal is hell, and how evil a journey's end. Pay attention, those people whom the angels make them together in death while they are still have sinned against themselves, the angels will ask, "What was the matter with you?" They will answer, "We were too weak in the world." The angels will say, "Was then Allah's world not wide enough for you to leave the area of evil? For such then the goal is hell. And how evil a journey's end." May Allah keep us from going there. Explanation 123. Literally, in what condition were you, i.e., while alive in this world? This refers to people who avoid without valid excuse, without acceptable, reasonable excuse, all struggle in God's cause. Explanation 124. Literally, was not God's earth wide so that you could migrate therein? The term hijrah, literally exodus, derived from the word hajara, he migrated, is used in the Quran in two senses, in two meanings. One of them is historical, denoting, showing the exodus of the Prophet and his companions, comrades, from Mecca to Medina, while the other has a moral connotation, moral meaning, namely, that's to say, man's hijrah, from evil, from bad things towards God, towards Allah, and does not necessarily imply the leaving of one's homeland in the physical sense. It is this wider moral and ethical meaning of the term hijrah to which the above passage refers, just as the preceding former passage, verses from 95 to 96, referred to striving, struggling hard in God's cause, jihad in Arabic, in the widest sense of the term, embracing, containing both physical and moral efforts and sacrifice, if need be, of one's possessions and even one's life. While the physical exodus from Mecca to Medina ceased to be obligatory for the believers after the conquest of Mecca in the year 8th Hijri, the spiritual exodus from the domain of evil to that of righteousness continues to be a fundamental demand of Islam. In other words, a person who does not migrate from evil unto God cannot be considered a believer, which explains the condemnation, the denunciation in the next sentence of all who are remiss, who are careless in this respect. Verse number 98. إلا المستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا. But accepted shall be the truly helpless, be they men or women or children, who cannot bring forth any strength and have not been showing the right way. Explanation 125. Or cannot find the right way, implying that they are helplessly confused and cannot therefore grasp this basic demand of Islam. They couldn't leave their place because they were poor people. They were not powerful enough. That the message relating to this demand has not been adequately, sufficiently conveyed and explained to them. Verse number 99. فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. As for them, God may well efface their sin, for God is indeed an absolver of sins, much forgiving. As for them, Allah may well obliterate, erase their sin, for Allah is really a pardoner of sins, much forgiving. Verse number 100. ومن يهاجر في سبيل الله يجد في الأرض مراغما كثيرا وسعة ومن يخرج من بيته مهاجرا إلى الله ورسوله ثم يدركه الموت فقد وقع أجره على الله وكان الله غفورا رحيما. And he who forsakes the domain of evil for the sake of God shall find on earth many a lonely road, as well as life abundant. And if anyone leaves his home, fleeing from evil unto God and his apostle, and then death overtakes him, his reward is ready with God, for God is indeed much forgiving, a dispenser of grace. And he who leaves the domain of evil, the area of evil, for the sake of Allah, shall find on earth in this world many places of refuge, as well as life plentiful. And if anyone leaves his country, escaping from evil unto God and his apostle, and then death overtakes him, he dies, his reward is ready with God, for God is really forgives much, he gives grace. Explanation 126. The word muragham, this Arabic word muraghaman in the verse, is derived from the noun ragham, dust, and is related with the idiomatic expression raghima anfuhu. His nose was made to cleave to dust. His nose was made to cleave to dust means he was forced to leave his folk, his people. I.e., he became humbled, he became low and forced to do something against his will. Although he doesn't want to do something, he is forced to do something. Thus, muragham shows a road by the taking of which one leaves one's people, his own people, against their will. Zamakhshari says, it being understood that this separation from one's familiar environment involves what is described as muraghamah, the breaking off from another or the cutting off from friendly or living communion people. See Lane Dictionary. All this can be best rendered, given meaning, in the above context, as a lonely road, a metaphor, figurative language is used here, of that heartbreaking loneliness, which almost always accompanies the first steps of one who sets forth on his exodus from evil unto God. Regarding this latter expression, see note on verse 97 above, as well as Surah, the chapter Baqarah, and verse number 218. What does this Quranic verse say? Those who believed, and those who migrated and fought for the sake of Allah, those look forward to Allah's mercy. Allah is forgiving and merciful. Verse number 101. وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ إِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَن يَفْتِنَكُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ كَانُوا لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. And when you go forth to war on earth, you will incur no sin by shortening your prayers, if you have reason to fear that those who are bent on denying the truth might suddenly fall upon you. For verily, those who deny the truth are your open foes. And when you go forth to war on earth in this world, you will fall into no sin by shortening your prayers, salahs, if you have reason to fear that those who are inclined to deny the truth might suddenly fall upon you, attack you. For verily those who deny the truth are your clear enemies. Explanation 127. The prayer, a reference to the 5 obligatory daily prayers at dawn, noon, afternoon, after sunset, and late in the evening, which may be shortened and combined, the noon prayer with that of the afternoon and the sunset prayer with that of the late evening, if one is traveling or in actual danger. While the extension of this permission to peaceful travel has been authorized by the Prophet's Sunnah. Quran doesn't say that travelers can shorten their prayers, but Sunnah says so. The Quran mentions it only in connection with war situations. And this justifies, proves right, the interpolation meaning in the opening sentence of the verse to war. The prayer described in the next verse with the congregation praying in shifts by shifts is called Salat al-Khawf, prayer in danger. Explanation 128. Literally might cause you an affliction, anguish, suffering, implying, according to almost all commentators, a sudden attack.